We begin with some breaking news coming in on the war in Ukraine. According to multiple media reports, U.S. President Joe Biden has authorized Ukraine to use U.S.-supplied long-range missiles for strikes deep inside Russia. This major policy shift comes after months of requests by Ukraine and just 2 months before President-elect Donald Trump takes office. Trump has criticized Biden's strong support for Ukraine. Well, for more, we're joined now by DW reporter Stefan Simons in Washington, D.C., and Namisha Jaiswal should be standing by for us in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. So according to media reports, as I just mentioned, Joe Biden is apparently going to allow Ukraine to launch attacks using these longer-range weapons supplied by the United States. Why are we seeing this policy shift now? Stefan, maybe we can begin with you.
Well, sure. Well, that's a very good question. I don't have an answer for you, not a concrete answer. What I mean by this is there is no confirmation even that this is happening and that the Biden administration has shifted long-standing policy on Ukraine in its fight against Russia by allowing U.S. weaponry used to be deep into the country, into Russia, up to those rockets. What they are talking about, what we're talking about, they are reaching 306 kilometers into Russian territory. That's quite a bit. So there is no statement from the White House, no comment, nothing from the State Department as of now. This will maybe change soon, later, who knows? But it is quite, of course, quite a change, a very significant change of long-standing policy of the United States. The Biden administration was pushed and pressured oftentimes to allow this to happen, to allow the Ukrainians to use the American weaponry, which is able to reach far, hundreds of miles and kilometers into Russian territory, and that was always declined. Now, apparently, a shift in this policy, and this just a few weeks before, well, maybe not even 2 months before a new administration takes over, that of President-elect Donald Trump.
Well, Stefan, you just mentioned it. It's just about 9 weeks, and Joe Biden is going to be out of his job as president. Is it likely that President-elect Trump will simply undo this policy as soon as he takes office?
That would make me speculate. I can tell you with some confidence that President-elect Trump has already promised to undo a trove of measures of the Biden administration via executive orders on his first day, second day, first week in power. If this will be also part of the undoing of the Biden administration's policies and political agendas implemented over the last 4 years internationally or here in the country, that remains to be seen. It is absolutely possible. Now, what is the closest thought of what the motivation is for the Biden administration to allow this now? It is actually mentioned quite a bit by observers or experts that the Biden administration is really concerned about those North Korean troops now on the battlefield and being a few thousand of them still in training, but being brought to the front lines, helping, supporting Russian troops in their fight against Russia. And maybe that has triggered the permission or this policy change of the Biden administration. Also a reason would be and could be, but again, this is speculating and listening to a few other voices, expert voices though, it is the massive drone attacks Ukraine has faced in the last few weeks, days, just today with the massive drone strikes on the Ukraine by the Russians. Those drones are not launched right at the border, close to the border. They are more launched inland in Russia. And maybe this is now a chance, with the permission by the U.S. administration, to use those U.S. weapons to target those drone batteries further inside Russia.
All right, that was DW's Stefan Simons for us in Washington, D.C. Stefan, thank you very much. And now we have the line to DW's Nimisha Jaiswal, who is standing by for us in Kiev. So, Nimisha, this is a huge shift in policy. The Ukrainians have been asking for this for what seems like forever. How has the news been received there?
Well, Mariana, exactly. The Ukrainians have been asking for this for months now, and the news has been received joyously, at least from the public, from news websites and blogs, from military bloggers and across social media channels. We are seeing celebratory announcements about this report of ATACMS, the permission to use ATACMS. We are already seeing people releasing maps of exactly how far into Russia these ATACMS can reach. Now, of course, the current reports seem to indicate that the initial permission would be for Kursk, but these maps already show the range across Russia. And also military bloggers here are analyzing that could this be Biden's attempt to torpedo any effort by the Trump administration to bring a peace that is forced not on Kyiv's terms but on Moscow's. And of course, they believe that in the next 2 months, Ukraine could do a lot with these permissions. It does seem that US officials think, however, that this will not change the course of the war, at least according to the reports that we are seeing on US media.
Well, Nimisha, maybe if you could tell us a bit more about these weapons, what kind of difference then could it make for Ukraine's war effort, even if some analysts seem to think it really won't be decisive? Does Ukraine see it the same way?
Well, absolutely. The perspective here in Ukraine is completely different when it comes to the difference these weapons can make. So the permission right now is about US ATACMS missiles. These have a range of over 300 kilometers. The last permitted range of the HIMARS by the US is about 80 kilometers. And this was also granted in response to Russia's offensive on Kharkiv to allow Ukraine to defend itself in Kharkiv. Now, if these ATACMS permissions has come because of the push in Kursk and because of the presence of North Korean troops, the hopes are that Ukraine can use these long-range missiles to hit concentrations of Russian and North Korean troops, to hit ammunition depots, supply lines as well, and to essentially hobble that effort to retake territory in Kursk. And Ukrainians believe this is essential because the more territory they can hang on to in Kursk at a time when tens of thousands of troop buildup is being reported in the region, the more they would have to be able to potentially negotiate or trade with Russia at a time when negotiations are brought out if they want Ukrainian territory in exchange for Russian territory. Another key hope over here, of course, is that European partners follow suit. We have Storm Shadow missiles already in Ukraine from the UK. We have Scalp missiles from France, but the permissions haven't come through yet. Earlier, European partners also followed suit when the US allowed for HIMARS to be used. And there's the hope that even if Trump decides to roll back this permission in 2 months, Europeans, if they give it right now, will not roll it back. Another key point to watch, however, and a reminder to our viewers, is that the ATACMS have been in Ukraine already for a year now. They were first transferred actually in response to North Korea providing longer-range ballistic missiles to Russia. And the permission to use these ATACMS was within Ukrainian territory, so occupied Crimea and the Black Sea. Ukraine is already using ATACMS within occupied Crimea and the Black Sea. So the other key question is how many ATACMS are left? And based on that, we'll see how exactly it would be used in Kursk. And of course, Ukraine hopes that that permission extends across Russia as well. And another key hope is that Germany finally grants those much needed Taurus missiles that have a range of 500 kilometers, the Storm Shadows and Scalps a range of 250 kilometers. So an effort to get deeper and deeper into Russian territory.
Thank you so much for that. That was DW's Nimisha Jaiswal for us in Kiev. We really appreciate your reporting. And staying in Ukraine, authorities there say all regions of the country will face power cuts on Monday after fresh damage to the country's energy infrastructure. In Russia's largest bombardment in months, more than 200 missiles and drones targeted energy infrastructure across the country. Moscow has stepped up attacks in recent days, and fears are mounting in Ukraine that Russia will attempt to cripple energy infrastructure as the winter approaches.
Air raid sirens are nothing new for the residents of Kyiv, who calmly make their way to metro stations for shelter. Russian airstrikes have become an almost daily occurrence for them. But this barrage of drone and missile attacks was the biggest and most widespread in at least 3 months. With Russia unleashing at least 120 missiles and 90 drones all across Ukraine, from Lviv in the west to Zaporizhia in the east and Odessa in the south. Officials in several regions confirmed damage to infrastructure or reported power cuts, including in the Black Sea port and resort city of Odessa. Russia's defense ministry says it's targeting, quote, critical energy infrastructure and facilities tied to Kiev's military industry. One Kiev resident described the moment a hole was ripped in the roof of his residential building.
About 5 minutes after the air raid alert started, we heard a loud whistle and a bang. This explosion probably caused a piece of shrapnel to hit the roof and pierce the concrete ceiling. Earlier, we heard reports of a fire. Although there was no fire, we could smell sulfur.
At least 2 of the deaths occurred overnight in Mykolaiv in the south. 6 others were injured, including 2 children. Russia's relentless aerial bombardment has destroyed half of Ukraine's energy production capacity, according to Ukrainian authorities. With the harsh Ukrainian winter fast approaching, the country is already suffering from major energy shortfalls.